and Corey are here in person. We're at Corey's house.
We've all come together at last.
Yes.
In one very cavernous room.
Yes, this is huge thanks to the magic of 9mm lenses.
Excellent.
Wide angle lenses.
So we thought we kind of wanted to do a sort of a stump John Linneman sort of thing, maybe. We want to we want to just pull off random games from Corey's shelf and see if John has anything interesting to say about them.
We can try. But
So,
please don't stump me on the first one. Because it could happen.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let's go with. I feel like you might have interesting things to say about Demon's Crest.
Well, I mean, of course, because this has become one of the most sought after Super NES games, I think, in recent years, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great looking Capcom game that was hugely overlooked, but I think it's a great looking game because it's like the nice mix of really good sprite work and they do a lot of color math, transparency effects.
Yeah.
And then of course it's got that really cool Mode 7 style. I think
overworld.
The overworld where like the two planes like rotate at separate directions. I think, or like at a slightly different way. To give it a little bit more depth than you typically see.
Yeah.
And so I think that's good stuff as well. Plus the soundtrack is excellent.
Soundtrack, especially the first level and like the true ending music.
Exactly.
I think you ran into an interesting issue with the game on certain SNES consoles.
On one chips.
I've heard this, the one chip glitch. That's right.
On the title screen where the fire.
But isn't it only an issue if you use a certain type of sync cable?
I had an issue with it. It's cropped up like since then.
Okay.
It's just a very like in the situation, it just didn't crop up that time.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But still, great game. I'm happy I got my copy before the
I got that for Christmas, like when it came out, but then I sold it and then I had to rebuy it.
There's an interesting thing about in Nintendo Power, in their top 100 list games, their top 100 games list that I covered once before.
Yeah.
They actually say in there that in 1 week it sold negative copies because more people returned it than bought it. But I don't know if I believe that.
I hope that's not true.
I don't know if I believe that.
That cannot be true.
All right, Corey, your turn. Pick something.
My turn, huh? Well, I feel like like a lot of stuff about
modern games,
especially
and retro. But yeah,
but yes. it is your kind of day-to-day work.
That's true.
Yeah. I haven't even thought about it now. It's like I get in here. What about what can you tell me about Godzilla on the PS4?
Not a whole lot, actually. This is, I mean, from what I've played,
it's not a great game.
It's a mediocre kind of.
But as a Godzilla fan, it was.
For me, it's like Godzilla always goes back to the Dreamcast era, just because that was one of the few games that the system
It's like a launch game. Yeah,
exactly.
Godzilla Generations.
Godzilla Generations, and those. So, I feel like this kind of does feel like the natural evolution of what they were trying to do with Godzilla Generations.
Yeah.
And this one specifically, I've only played a little bit, so.
Wasn't there a PS3 version of that as well?
I think there was. I think that's right. This was like from that like sort of cross-platform kind of era. So
it's a good game. I mean, it's not a great game.
It seems decent, but
it's a novelty.
So I won't say you stumped me on that, but maybe a little bit.
It does have great box art.
Yeah, I'll do an easy one for you because I know you are a big fan of driving games.
Oh well, yeah, I love driving games.
So what in particular can we say that's interesting?
This is Gran Turismo.
Well, so yes, this is Gran Turismo, and it's nice double jewel case design, even though it's just one disc.
So a lot of things.
What was really cool about the Gran Turismo games on PlayStation, it was one of the first games, I believe, on the system to attempt to do sort of a fake environment mapping effect, where they sort of wrap an image around the car. Reflections and stuff, right? To sort of give it's not really reflecting anything, but they use a separate texture to give the impression of like glossiness and shine on the cars, which was pretty new, I think. I mean, even like you look at Daytona USA in the arcade, much more advanced game than this, but they just like draw like a texture scrolling across the windshield, like a set rate kind of, to give the impression of clouds reflecting, where this, applied to the whole car. And I think Need for Speed 3 on the PC at least did something like this as well, but I think this may have come out first. But either way, on the PlayStation 1, this was it was pretty advanced for the time.
What kind of advances did the second game make over the first one?
The second one just definitely improved the complexity of everything, and I think it did improve the reflection stuff, and it was just a more refined game, but at the same time, I think the second one didn't run quite as well either. It was a little bit more...
It felt a little bit more rushed.
It was a little chunkier. I think the third one is where it got really technically amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that they've really... I mean, Gran Turismo Sport maybe is the first time they've really exceeded what they've done on PlayStation 2.
Really?
I think. Because, like, the PlayStation 2 ones were top to bottom, like, buttoned up perfection. I mean, even right down to the menus and stuff. Like, everything's 60 frames per second. They got videos, everything in there. It was just a beautiful presentation. So, and it started with this.
Better than Motor 2 and Grand Prix, from, like Gran Turismo 3 to 4, I mean, it was kind of surprising, I think, that they made... Like, I felt like it was surprising they made a 4 on the PS2 and that they made a 6 on the PS3.
I think it's just an effect of their long development cycle.
Yeah.
Where I think, but they finished, the 3 came out in 2001. Like, the PS3 hadn't even been out a year in America yet. And so, obviously, they had to work on something else. They also did Tourist Trophy. But I think, you know, just naturally, they're not thinking, like, well, we're going to target the next system back in 2001, right? Doesn't make sense, so... I think that's probably why it just took them a while to finish their next projects, and it just happened to
hit when it did. Maybe like skipped on 6, they could have focused on.
See, that's the thing. I always said that 6 should have been a PS4 game. Yeah. Even if it wasn't fully pushing the system, I think it would have made a better early PS4 game than a PS3 game. It would have gotten a lot more attention. Yeah, like in that first year, if they had come out, you know. They needed it. I mean, do you feel like, I don't know how Sport did. Do you think that it's kind of like lost a little bit of its luster in recent years? I mean, visually, I think Sport came back in a big way, and it looks amazing. It's like a huge step up from what we've seen before. But
do people care like they used to?
It's a really good game. I think it's the best the driving's ever been in that series, but it's so limited on content because it's very focused on just that, like, the racing. Right. But I did see that they just added, like, a whole new campaign to the game, like, akin to the old games. Like, they just added it in for free as like an extra thing. That's pretty huge. Which means that they're gonna have to release like a complete version on disc down the line if we actually want to own it properly. Do you think that they would just like forego like having an actual 7 now? It's hard to say. With the success of this, and it seems like they're trying to make this a living platform. I mean, maybe next generation they'll go back to 7, but for now, I'm not so sure. It does kind of feel like it's hard to say where they go from here. Yeah. And I don't know how successful this is going to be. It seems to be doing all right, though. So. That's interesting. So, I mean, I'm not a huge driving game fan, but I do like I like the arcade style racers, and I always loved it with the second game. They include like the arcade disc, and simulation disc. That was great. And of course, I guess GT3 and all that had that as well, like arcade mode at least, which was similar. But I mean, are they still not allowed to put damage on the cars? No, there's damage. Okay. I think it's very basic. Because they were not allowed to for several games. That's worked out. Forza also has damage going on. Forza's is better, but it's still not. It's still kind of minimal. It's not like Burnout where parts are flying off the cars and the whole thing's crumpling up. It's like, oh, the bumper's flappy. So. All right. So what do we got next? All right. What can we pull? How about Ninja Gaiden 3 on the NES? Oh my gosh, this game is brutal. I know. You were telling me about that you and a friend... We actually finished this, yeah. Like with the course of a day, right? Yeah, just like constantly replaying.
I mean, to do that...
You get really efficient.
Yeah. To do that with limited continues is...
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I beat it, the Famicom version, and...
Famicom version is pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, the last level is pretty hard, but
that's the big hang-up.
The thing I like about Ninja Gaiden 3 is it feels like there's a very good flow to the level. Almost every time that they drop a certain power-up item, chances are the next several enemies are going to be placed pretty well to use that on.
Yeah, I feel like this actually has the best flow of the series. Yeah. And it's also the one that I think is the most technically impressive in terms of what it's doing. Like, you noticed a lot of the fake parallax effect in this game. Yeah. Where it's just, like, changing the interrupts to, like, update scan lines at a slightly different rate than the foreground. Right. Which I've explained before, which just means, like, you can't have foreground and background intersect. So it's always going to be, like, you know, like this is moving like this, and then, you know, there's a slightly different speed. Kind of like a single scan line separated. Yeah, but, like, with the desert stage, like, they actually do, like... real depth to it to give it like multiple layers. Yeah. Kind of like it starts to look more like a real 16-bit game.
You know, me and a friend joked that almost every level in that game looks like it could be the last level. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
like there's this one level that's like maybe 2 levels from the last level, where it's like all this like wriggling. You're like inside sort of an alien-ish structure, and it's just wriggling, kind of like the last level in the Japanese version of Contra 1.
That's right. Yes, that's right. So, great game, great soundtrack.
Yeah.
I think this whole series sounds awesome, and it uses those cool drum samples, which for the digital.
That one has like some voices in it too.
Yep. So,
this
is up there with. I mean, this is definitely like a later Tail NES game, so it's more like a Shatterhand or something in terms of like complexity and just quality. I think it's a big step up from Gaiden 1 and 2.
With 2 and 3, they did that crazy like rainbowing effect on the life bar, all the information up at the top of the screen.
All right, what's gonna be next? You know what? Let's Corey has this sealed, but I really like this game.
Oh, yeah,
Zombie U.
I mean, this was one of those. This was like the only launch game for the Wii U that really, I think, kind of demonstrated what the concept means, right?
You
had to like look down at the gamepad, like kind of to go through your backpack.
Yeah,
it was very immersive in that way.
When you're using it to like, I think some of the items or like weapons you could use, you have to use this to aim the gamepad.
Yeah, and it sounds gimmicky, but it actually worked really well.
I thought it looked good at the time. It went a little bit heavy on chromatic aberration, I think. But
which is what? I mean, that's like the edge of the screen, right? Where it
that's like
goes,
when the colors separate a little bit,
like around the edge of the screen.
It looks a little soft and blurry.
Sometimes just the edge, but sometimes like the whole image like gets like,
it should be only near the edge.
It should only be near the edge, and obviously it's designed to simulate a bad lens or something. But it can still look. It can give something a little bit more.
It was a
realistic
fad
tinge.
for a little while.
Yeah, it's sort of the softness of the game kind of helped hide some of the flaws. Whenever you make something look a little grungier and dirtier, it like sort of almost makes it more real in that way. But I assume 720p native?
Yeah, it's native 720p, 30 frames per second with some light slowdown.
What improvements? Because it was re-released on newer
platforms. I mean, it's just a nice res boost, and it runs smoother.
How does it play without the gamepad? Then?
It plays fine because most of the features on the gamepad can be easily relegated to a normal controller, I think.
Okay.
But I think this is the way to play it, just because I still think that this is one of the best uses of the gamepad that the system ever saw. Yeah. Because it added a lot to the tension and just like it gave you something to do, and I think it works.
But it was a well designed game in its own right.
Despite the awful box art, really.
Yeah, I mean that's.
I don't know. One of the British guard with the fuzzy hat is a zombie.
It's pretty bad though.
I don't know. It's not that bad.
I think it's cool because Ubisoft is like, beside Nintendo, I think Ubisoft always, at least on the Wii consoles, really showed what those machines could do. Like, this on the Wii U, but then remember Red Steel 2?
Yeah.
I've never played that, but I've been hearing people talk about that more recently. Like, that is a real hidden gem on it.
So Red Steel 1 is a bad game.
Yeah, I've played a little of it.
It's not good. I don't like it. Red Steel 2, they upgraded it. It runs smooth 60 frames per second. The controls are much, much more interesting and accurate. It's a really fast-paced, like smooth playing game in a way that the original was not. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, I would. Do you have it?
I don't. I mean, that's one of those games that you
always
heard
forget
about
to
as
look.
Kind of a showpiece for the system, but
I always forget to look for it.
And then people kind of turn on it like pretty quickly. You know what I mean?
It's neat. You should check it out.
Let's pick something. Because, I mean...
PS2?
Yeah, you have a pretty good specialty in PS2.
The PS2 episode.
Yep.
We can tell me about Rumble Roses.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this was the era of Konami, right?
Yeah.
Konami and PlayStation 2 was like top of its game, I think. It's one of the best developers. And the Rumble Roses project, I mean, you know what it's going for. Yeah. Technically speaking, it does...
It's a fun game.
It's fun, and it looks pretty good. I think it looks visually better than a lot of comparable games on that. Like, the animation's all right, and the character models are detailed, and it's fast, and it's actually...
It's 60 frames, right? I mean, I feel like it looked like...
I can't remember. I think it's 60. I need to double check on that. I know that the Xbox 360 XX is only 30.
Oh, okay.
I feel like this was 60 and that was 30, and I was kind of a step down in some ways, but it's been a while, so I need to refresh on that. So I didn't play that much Rumble Roses.
I mean, when I captured it for the PS2 episode, like, this is really fun.
You know, I gotta say though, I had to be ultra careful when you sent me that footage.
Yeah.
I had to make like 3 or 4 cuts before I actually found a clip that didn't have a panty shot.
Oh gosh.
Well, that's what the game is.
I know. So it was like, oh, I put down the timeline. I'm like, wait, nope, let's try another.
How about this though? See, you pull that out, but what about, you don't seem to have Konami's other unique title, Psy Girls. Remember that?
I do remember the names.
No.
So
I remember like
is
the
a weird
PSI.
Is it CY?
Yeah,
CY Girls, and it's like it's an action game. It runs on the same like basic technology as Metal Gear Solid 2, and it looks very similar to that visually. Not quite as nice because it's a lower budget game, I think. But it's a weird little like action game that's kind of.
If I see it, I'll buy it.
If you see it though, it's a weird curiosity piece. So what do we got next?
I feel kind of inclined to go back to Super Nintendo for some reason. What about this? This is one of my absolute favorite games on the system. Kirby Superstar.
Yeah, with the SA1 chip.
It has the SA1 chip, but
it doesn't really use it that way.
Yeah, in what capacity would you say it is?
I would say, I mean, since it's like the extra, it's like a 10 megahertz processor. It's faster than what's in the regular Super NES. Theoretically, you could just use it to support more complex scenes and more sprites, more stuff happening on screen, I would imagine, is what you could do with that. But this was a neat game because of just how much content was crammed in here.
Yeah.
And I think it really pushes the Super NES hard. I mean, they do a lot of, like, there's, like, boss scenes that do a lot of the scaling and rotation within that, and, like, the cool background stuff.
Was that before or after Dreamland 3?
This was before.
Before. It came out in September 96, and Dreamland 3 came out in 97. But they both used the SA1. Would you say Dreamland 3 actually utilizes the SA1 in any meaningful capacity?
I think they use them in similar ways. I think Dreamland 3 kind of looks better, though, because, like, this goes for more of, like, that 3D rendered look.
Right,
I don't think it pulls it off quite as well.
I wouldn't say really rendered, but
a little bit. It has like some like
it's
trying to shade it to give it some depth.
Right, but there's like a lot of dark outlines around characters and
Whereas
stuff.
I think Dreamland 3 just looks outstanding.
Dreamland 3 is, but this is a much better game.
This is a better game. Dreamland 3 is pretty boring.
Yeah, it is an interesting game, but it's slow and a little stiff. And the special objectives you have to do on all the levels are kind of.
In a lot of ways, though, that's kind of like that game is one of the reasons that the Kirby series kind of like got all these weird kind of games for a long time, right?
I mean, I don't know if I would say that. I mean, the interesting thing about Superstar is, that was. I almost look at it as Sakurai's prototype for Smash Brothers because there's a lot of similarities. You've got the R button guard. You've got all the powers that have the different moves that you can do when you hold up, down, left, right. I mean, very similar move sets to Smash Brothers. And then for some reason I thought this is like the pinnacle of Kirby at the time. You've got these complex move sets for all these, but then they like just took that away and they went to much more basic. They did gimmicks like 64. You could combine powers, but
64 is not great.
It wasn't until Return to Dreamland that they brought back the Superstar control scheme. And now, I've been saying we're in a Kirby golden age now.
I think Kirby Superstar on the regular DS is actually the better version.
I've only played a little bit
because they redid everything with this gorgeous pixel art that I think looks better than the art in this.
I need to give it
really nice looking.
I need to give it more of a.
It's the best game to play on a DSi XL.
I love DSi.
Juicy giant pixels.
The only problem is the versions that they've been putting on DS and 3DS, the A button jumps.
That's right.
I mean, I can get used to it, but why? Why?
That's like garbage.
And I like how they did Kirby Triple Deluxe on the 3DS because I think the original was Kirby Super Deluxe, the Japanese version.
Yeah.
And it has that box that looks like it's made of wood. It's like a wood grain box. It's like Kirby's like Super Deluxe, and then they did 3DS. It's Triple Deluxe.
They did that with
never thought.
Or 3D.
With exactly.
You're right. So the Dream Collection, which also normally comes in a pink slip
I have it up here.
Over there. But yeah, this is exactly the style that they went for. That's what the Super Famicom Super Deluxe.
I should revisit this now that I kind of have some experience doing the show. Like, how did I don't know how the Game Boy ports are on there.
I believe, from when I last checked, I have this as well. The pretty good ports. It's just I think it's like 240i or 40p.
Nothing runs in 240p.
It just kind of doesn't look great. And like Kirby 64, it's like running that emulation with like the higher res mode. So it just kind of looks weird. It's like not bad, but it's not amazing.
It's not worth having instead of the original version.
No, it's worth having as a secondary option.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, what can you tell me about the Simpsons game?
I liked this a lot back in the day. Like, the
it's
game
kind of an open world,
well,
right? Isn't it like open world?
Sort of. So it's like a series of vignettes.
Yeah.
And it's like you basically have to play through each one. And so there's pseudo open world, but it's each like kind of a themed thing. And the
is it better than Bart versus the Space Mutants?
Probably. There's some good moments in here though, like the Game Factory where they're kind of making fun of EA and everything, and like the guy in charge is Will Wright.
Oh, really?
And of course, because
Sims,
what was this from? 2007, of course. So they had to have the "I'm Will Wright, bitch" kind of line in there. Yeah. That was pretty funny, and it's like they do try to make fun of some of like EA's IPs, I guess.
Yeah.
Like what was it? It was like Medal of Homer, instead of Medal of Honor and stuff like that.
When
some of the humor is like late, so some of the humor is very much like that generation of Simpsons, which I don't like. I'm not a big fan of later Simpsons, like most people, but I kind of enjoyed the movie. There's some good episodes in there, and this has some good stuff, and it's like original stories and good Simpsons animation for the time.
Now that's the PS3 version. How does it compare?
This was at a time when, so this was actually pretty decent on PS3. It is better on 360, but only just.
Wasn't there a Wii Simpsons game released around the same time? I don't think it was supposed to be the same.
Yeah, they had this. It was also, I think there was like DS, maybe PSP. I can't remember, but there was other iterations of this. But this specific version was just PS3 and 360.
No PC version.
No, I mean PC versions still weren't like a huge thing.
No. That was just around the time when PC ports were starting to become good and more common.
People were really asking for them.
But at the time, it was still kind of not that common.
I mean, would you put it on par, like, with, like, say, like, the South Park games? Like, it captures, like,
in a way, but
show,
I think
like,
this does a better job because it really looks like South Park, and the game is better. Whereas that, it's 3D polygonal.
Yeah.
It looks good for the time. It's good cell shading, but it's still not, it's not great.
Right.
It's a very mediocre game that's interesting.
This is one I gotta play. Got in clearance. $10. So I've opened it.
That's the new one, the Fractured Butthole.
Yeah.
Includes that ported over to the new system.
Is it on the disc?
Ooh, that's a good point. I need to double check. But yeah, it does include. It's probably not though. I bet I need to double check that. But still, it's cool that they basically have. There's like a PS4 and port of that at least.
Yeah.
It seems. I think looking at the packaging, I actually picked up a copy of that on sale here, so I need to check it out. I was just surprised. I was like, wait, it includes that?
Yeah.
The only thing that I guess it could be a PS Now thing, and I hope that's not the case.
Right.
Hopefully, it's not.
I mean,
the case.
it's only on the on the PS4 version, right?
I don't know if it's on the Xbox One version.
I don't know.
We'll have to check.
What do we think about the PSP port of Breath of Fire 3? I've not played Breath of Fire.
So that was released in the US digitally.
But this is a
PAL copy. So it's like the same type that I have.
How's it? I've not played. I've not played on PS1 yet. So which one do I want to play?
This is directly related to the ports of Rockman Dash 1 and 2 for the PSP as well.
Oh, I forgot.
These are all games that were essentially PS1 conversions to the PSP.
Yeah.
They have slight changes and enhancements, but it's ultimately still looks very much like a regular PS1 game with no real major improvements.
Not that that's a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. This was before like PS1 emulation even existed on the PSP, right? So Capcom back then was doing this. But I believe Sony Computer Entertainment America was very much against bringing PS1 style games directly to the Vita or to the PSP,
right?
Without greatly enhancing them. Like I know they did Ape Escape on the PSP, but that had enough changes and improvements that it was kind of like a remake more than anything. Where this was really like a direct port.
Yeah.
Same pixelated visuals and texture warping. I mean, it just looked like a PS1 game.
But widescreen.
I don't even think it's proper widescreen.
So is it actually kind of crop the view a bit?
I know for the Rockman Dash games, I need to refresh on this one. Like you can actually choose from different views, and they kind of do something to like make it seem widescreen, but I think it's just like a weird stretch that maybe crops a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of not amazing.
So if someone has not played Breath of Fire 3 and they live in America, it's probably just as well to get the PS1 version and not bother importing the PSP.
I'd recommend the PS1 version because it looks better 240p on a TV.
Yeah, that's
I mean, exactly.
Unless you really like.
And the PS1 version will never be released. Didn't they have some issue with like the rights to the voices that they used in it?
I can't remember that.
Like they didn't sign like the complete enough agreement with the voice actors.
I will say that Breath of Fire 3 was the first game I ever experienced through a PlayStation emulator.
Really?
I was experimenting with really old PlayStation emulators back in like the late 90s when they were super early. It was Breath of Fire 3 first. That's the first one I got running.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't run great, but it worked. And then also Bushido Blade. Like those are the two I had going.
Bushido Blade's a great game.
On my PC. And just being able to see them on the PC, even though they didn't work well, was a novelty because you could run them in high res mode.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But still, it was bad. Not a good way to play them at the time.
How about Axelay?
Oh yeah,
it's a great game.
Great Konami game.
And it, like the Mode 7 in it, like on the overhead scenes.
It looks curved.
They go over like a horizon almost.
It's like a DMA effect. So essentially, it's just manipulating the plane in a way. I mean, it's pseudo Mode 7, I suppose, but I like that. But I don't, because it's still a flat playfield with being manipulated.
Yeah.
The way the ships and stuff curve with it, I never liked. Like it would have been cool if they could have kept the sprite layer completely separate. But they kind of don't. So but it is good looking, and it's cool how they mix up between side scrolling and that overhead or vertical and horizontal.
I've not played it, but I have to confess that the gimmicky look to it makes me want to play it. It's appealing.
I mean, it's a great game.
It's neat looking. It sounds good.
Terranigma does a similar thing with its underworld map, where it has this sort of wrap.
But they put it on the ceiling.
Do you think it's a similar technique?
Oh, I mean, it's all related. It's all that type of effect. It's just depending on how they manipulate it, and it's the same here.
I can't think of many other examples of that that curve.
It's not that common, but it's cool. And it's from the era of Konami with the awesome box art.
And the curve in that, like it goes over the horizon, but in Terranigma, it kind of goes.
Yeah, it wraps up. It wraps up the screen.
Like
until it hits the top, and then that's where the top layer comes in. It creates this weird, like you're in a cavernous tunnel thing.
Yeah, well, you're inside the planet,
which is cool. So this is one case where you want this side sticking out because there's no crease, so it looks better that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just keep it.
I have a lot of boxes.
You know what I never noticed is that like you look at this, and it always tells you what side you're supposed to open because it has a little purple.
That's right. Open it up there.
Yeah, I didn't pay that.
That's good. It's a good game, though.
Yeah. It was a rental back in the day.
So what do we got next?
Here's what I was looking for. I do not know a ton about this game, but
Corey actually pretty.
Corey laughs a lot about this game.
I'm like a definite like fan of hard driving for all of its. I mean, it like uses polygons like in.
It's very choppy.
Yes.
I think what's more interesting...
And it runs at like 10 frames per second.
See, I think what's more interesting, I believe there was an NES version of this being crafted.
Really?
Where that was working, where I think they used like a series of like still images in a way. Like I can't remember how they did it, but the idea was to simulate the 3D look. They would cycle in the correct images based on what was happening to make it look like you're actually driving through something, even though it was completely faked.
Yeah.
Which, I mean... graphics kind of are, I guess, in general.
All graphics are fake.
All graphics are fake. It's all about doing the tricks to make them look cool. But but this
it does this with no hardware in the cart.
It makes sense considering who made it. But to me, this feels like a prototype Atari Jaguar game. That's what this is to me. This feels like this is what the Jag would be.
Yeah,
but not as good.
But I mean,
it's cool.
I have a soft spot for it.
Yeah,
I mean, the arcade version
was very special for the time. Like it was unique,
and it has the music that plays during the instant replays.
But it's interesting you say that they were thinking about making an NES port because I think a lot of the pseudo 3D, the Z-axis movement games on the NES are interesting because you have games like Rad Racer or Famicom 3D Hot Rally, and you've got these hills, and then you've got Mode 7 on the Super Nintendo, which everyone's just like, oh, let's do that for our so-called 3D movement, or use Super FX, for true 3D. Right. I feel like in the 16-bit generation, there's not as much of an expansion on that NES-style Z-axis movement, and I always really liked that.
I mean, I think it's just because of the type, the Mode 7 has its own limitations. It's just easier to do that in hardware because it's faster and easier to use.
Yeah,
or you could see even stuff like Atari carts and the Jaguar has like that type of plane, but it actually does like fakes like hills and stuff.
I like that stuff, like hills,
And that's even it's just like a Mario Kart track, but with hills, and it's totally fake. Yeah. It's really neat.
Well, they did like a hill kind of thing in Mode 7 with like the Super Empire Strikes Back. Like on the Hoth, they like, even though they're just kind of like pointed hills, but they're still, it
so
made
the thing
terrain
about with 3D World Runner though, it's not like you're looking at like a big tile map that can rotate around, right? That's not what it is. It's like it's just an effect to do with changing like different pixels on the different scan lines. You're always moving forward, or at least like kind of in that direction. Whereas with Mode 7, it allows you to fully rotate around in the whole play field. That was the difference. Like you gave up one for the other.
Right.
Like, it's just a totally different tech. Well, it's
but
a
3D World Runner didn't have hills.
That's true. It did not. It just had pits.
Lots
of pits.
We spent some time talking about this one the other day.
SSX. That was disappointing. I think so.
So this is SSX on the PS3.
I paid the right price for it.
Yeah.
Is this a port of the original or something?
So what this was originally there was like SSX, like dangerous something. Like they first pitched this as like violent dark SSX, which already exists as Dark Summit, if you remember.
Oh,
that.
Yep.
So, but it's like everything's gonna kill you or something, and then I think the crowds reacted very poorly to that, and they kind of retweeted to this. But it still has, I think, elements of that. Like I think the original idea was like, oh, you're gonna freeze out on the mountain and you have to survive on the hill. Which who wants that in SSX?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's the dumbest idea.
Just, make an HD version of 3.
But you still get that feeling that they're trying
to do. But there's nobody at the original team, involved in this.
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure about that. But either way, I don't think that this holds up as well. The camera placement is bad.
Yeah.
So, the field of view is kind of crunched in a little bit, so it just doesn't feel fast, and the frame rate's only 30 frames per second, when the originals at least targeted 60, mostly.
Except for the bottomless pits, man. The bottomless pits.
That's the problem. The mountain design sucks. The bottomless pits are everywhere. It's just not that fun.
It gets rid of that flow.
It's not SSX3.
Yeah.
Which I think we can agree
is by far
the best SSX.
Yeah.
But, I have a soft spot for the older ones as well, just because, the launching on the PS2 with SSX. And the music and
And Tricky was really good.
What was cool about the original SSX was, they were able to they had enough memory at that point to do very large maps. The levels could last for, 5 to 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. You just keep going, and the SSX3, you could go from the top of the mountain all the way to the bottom.
That was, streaming the whole thing,
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Because that was...
Even from the beginning, you're still, loading data as you play, I think, so... But it was also stuff like the particle effects.
Grand Theft Auto 3 was already out, which was streaming everything from the...
SSX3, yeah.
Or no, Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah, I know, but SSX3 was after GTA 3.
Right, same with Jak and Daxter was, streaming everything, too, right?
Jak and Daxter did all that. I mean, there was other... Obviously, one of the first games was Soul Reaver to do that.
Oh, yeah,
right, I remember the DF Retro on that.
That was a big tech feature of it, was, hey, streaming data in to do larger maps.
What about... the GBA Phantasy Star Collection?
Not a very good port.
No.
I mean, I'm a big Phantasy Star fan, and that one has 1, 2, and 3 on it, and
no 4.
No 4.
I think this is more of an Ask Corey on this one.
Oh,
I've intentionally avoided this collection. I don't have this collection.
It's not good.
I've heard nothing but bad.
I'd like to revisit it to see what the resolution is like, the scaling, if it's.
Well, it's probably 1-to-1 pixel, I would assume.
But it fills the whole screen, so I mean.
This was a bad time for this stuff. Sega on the GBA had some dark spots. I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog and whatever the remake, that thing on Game Boy Advance was that was complete garbage.
Well, and what was the deal? Why is it THQ?
Well, THQ was publishing a lot of their games.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah.
So
that's when they were really hurting, right after the Dreamcast.
This is
I mean, what can you tell me from looking at the screenshots?
It doesn't look awful, but it doesn't look like... I mean, even from the screenshots, it gives me the impression that it's not scaled very well. And they're very small shots, but I get the feeling that this isn't going to look great on the GBA screen. Or like,
well, you want to fire it up really quick?
We should.
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, do you have batteries?
We're going to do this live right now.
All right, we got the AGS 101.
I can pass judgment on this right now.
Plugged in right now.
We're going to do it live.
With the sound effects.
Yeah. Cling.
Let's see.
I had to analyze the way the sort of shine through that.
It is designed by Digital Eclipse, Digital Eclipse are like pretty good now, but there was a time when
they were putting out some not so good stuff.
By the time they used this logo all the time, right?
What are they doing now?
They did like the Mega Man collection.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think that was it always Mike Micah's company?
I think he was always involved in that, but
now that sounds like Phantasy Star. Oh, there's some weird scaling on that there.
Yeah, the artwork looks.
You can't scale it.
It looks accurate to the Master System game, but the scaling looks.
It doesn't look awful. I mean, I'll admit, but we got to.
The text looks good.
I want to see it scroll. See what they've done.
Let me see what the. Okay.
Here we go.
It's not that awful.
It's not that awful. But it doesn't...
Go.
This is great. This is great for the camera, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. We're just like, Let's just be real quiet. Not say anything.
Okay, we'll just whisper.
I mean, the music sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe...
The battle interface is redesigned to fit the screen, or it's moved to fit the screen at least.
So, okay, it doesn't seem that bad.
No.
But not, I don't know. I really need to compare this directly to the originals, like, to really get a feel.
Mm-hmm.
I do need to get a new AGS 101, because occasionally my battery will show as red. I got a brand new one. You can still order brand new batteries directly from Nintendo. I put a brand new one in there.
Just play some mobile games instead. Let's see here. That's funny.
What do I want to pick next? Let's pick something on the Wii.
Oh, the Wii.
Yeah. How about Castlevania Judgment?
Well, I mean, it has the great voiceover. Castlevania Judgment kind of thing,
I mean,
very serious.
I have heard it's actually not that bad of a game. It's just that people hate the artwork.
Yeah. I mean,
basically,
I've played this. It's
main
okay.
problem
It's
with
pretty
it.
ugly visually. The art is bad. There's some
Like the redesigns
questionable
of the
characters in here. Like, it just feels weird. Like, I wasn't a fan.
But it plays pretty good.
Plays all right. You're right. It's not bad.
Was that the last EGA game?
That's what I was just gonna say. I think this might the only one that might be around the same time or after was the downloadable the multiplayer
something of dissonance.
Harmony. No, it wasn't.
It was either Harmony of something or something of dissonance.
But it was obviously designed to be HD, right? Because that's
yes.
So yeah, not a huge fan of Castlevania Judgment, but it is fascinating.
I think I got it for $5. It's in great condition. It looked like it's never been played.
You did all right for yourself. You got some good Wii games on there, though.
I do.
Klonoa, that's
great. Klonoa is an amazing game.
That's a great version. What else we got?
I'm going to pull a TurboGrafx game off, or rather a PC Engine game off the shelf, and it's going to be something that I can't read. I don't know what I'm grabbing. So we're going to stump all of us, probably. Sidearm Special.
Sidearm
He just
Special.
brought that.
I picked that up locally for Corey.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. More for me because I remember buying the IBM PC DOS version of this.
It's a Capcom game, originally.
Yeah. And
is it like a sequel to Section Z, or is it?
I think so, yeah. And I like this version actually pretty well. But the DOS PC version is pretty bad. Or not great. I played in like CGA graphics.
I have the TurboGrafx in that version now. or the
HuCard version.
The HuCard version.
Okay, yeah, this was an NEC Avenue joint. They were doing a lot of the stuff back then for that. That's cool though. Yeah, this is not a bad game. It's a little bit weird the way the shooting and the mech works, I guess, compared to most shooters. But as far as I know, this was a pretty decent version. This one I don't actually own though. I started building my PC Engine library this year, but I don't have that yet. Oh, that's a classic.
Metal Gear Solid 3.
Oh, whew.
And the Subsistence like added a whole bunch of stuff. And
camera
especially.
So yeah, I first played the original version, and then I got Subsistence. Obviously, after that, after being a big fan. I did the same. And so there's some things I like about this. Obviously, the camera is a big thing, but it does feel a little bit tacked on, but it still works pretty well.
I mean, I thought it worked. I thought it was transformative, personally.
It made the game a lot easier to play, because the problem with the original was that they basically took out a useful radar system.
Yeah.
And then the actual overhead maps were much, much larger. So it really made it hard to get a feel for
you're zoomed in pretty close.
Yeah.
Did the new camera system impact the frame rate in any way?
No, not really. So there's a lot of versions of this, and this is an interesting one. The one with the best controls is the 3DS game.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
But it has by far the worst performance.
A lot of people forget that even exists.
It's not a good version of the game, but it's not a bad version. Because it does play very well, but it runs very poorly and it looks kind of worse. But it's neat. But this version was good, and I think this was the last game I purchased when I was living in Japan, because that's right before I moved back to the US. Like, this came out, the big box version of it, and I remember literally buying it like that day and then going to the airport afterwards. And I was like, I had this right in my hand luggage, like, oh yeah, I can't wait to get home and play this. And it had the big thick color manual in it and everything, so it was like this big thick box.
Yeah.
That was cool. I remember getting online and playing, like, once I got back to the US, connecting my PS2 up and actually playing online with people.
Yeah.
And, like, this was one of those things where it showed that Kojima's crew didn't understand how online games work. Because they always showed trailers to try to role play things. Like, look at all these people playing together. They make it look like the most amazing thing ever. But then, back then especially, it's like, it's just people teabagging everybody all day.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ubisoft still does that with like their like Rainbow Six trailers and stuff. They're all like, "Oh, what's that?" You know, like, "What's that?" Oh my gosh, you know, like it's like people don't really play like
play that way.
But I mean, Metal Gear Solid 3 will forever be my favorite Metal Gear.
Yeah, where does it rank in in terms of the series?
It's easily my favorite.
That's a toss-up between 2 and 3 for me.
Really?
I really like 2.
I like 2 a lot too, but now something interesting about this one from your perspective, you know, the frame rate in this is a big departure from what they established with 2.
Yeah.
How is the performance in Metal Gear Solid 3?
Oh, it's 30 frames per second target, but it drops a lot.
That's
a lot of the main scenes.
I mean, there's a lot more going on.
There's a lot more.
Like, I mean, because of the jungle.
What they were trying to do on PS2 here is crazy.
Yeah.
When you look at it, it's like that's a time when all like the plants and stuff where they were trying to use like actual modeled pieces of geometry that would react to things, and at the time that was just like almost unheard of.
And when you look between 2 and 3, you know, 2 still came at a time when skin basically didn't have texture on it.
Right. Yeah.
And in this, I'm pretty sure you've got a lot more skin texture.
It's definitely improved. And these games, you know, it was just like stuff like, you know, they did a lot of cinematic effects, I think, which was still special at the time.
Yeah.
Lots of depth of field usage and cool motion blur and like weird color filters, and tried to simulate shadows of the forest overhead on top of everything. Yeah. It was pretty amazing at the time.
I really love that game.
Great storyline in this
Plus the ladder climb.
Oh yeah.
Oh
the music
yeah.
Slowly.
And I love how long the game was too. Like you finally get to Groznygrad, and you're like, oh, I'm almost at the end, and it's like, wait, you're really just like halfway through in terms of overall length.
And then like the last like 2 hours of the game is just like one long crazy action sequence.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Let me look over here a second.
What can you tell me about? No.
About GameStack Volume 1?
GameStack Volume 1. I got this a few years ago, and it came to me on like Christmas Eve. And you know, I watched it that day, and it was amazing. So
yeah, did you get 2 as well?
Yep, of course. Good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of extra stuff in there.
It's really good. They did a good job.
Corey doesn't have the version that I'd hoped to pull off the shelf, but
sorry.
But GameCube version of Resident Evil 4 came out like shortly after Metal Gear Solid 3. And
Early 2005.
And I remember just thinking I just came off of Metal Gear Solid 3, and then I'm moving into Resident Evil 4, and like these two games that just completely blew me away back to back came out.
And it was alongside Metroid Prime 2, Halo 2, and Half-Life 2.
It was a good time.
It was like a good 3 months there, just nothing but classics.
So, you know, the original GameCube version of Resident Evil 4, which this essentially is with a different control scheme layered on top of that, but I mean, from a technical perspective,
it was mind blowing at the time.
Yeah, I mean, its frame rate's pretty solid too, right?
It's almost completely locked.
Yeah,
it really uses the GameCube's like more advanced, like the TEV unit and everything to do a lot of cool, fancy effects there, like shader like effects, especially stuff with like the infamous flame room, or however you want to call it.
The lava room.
The lava room.
That is still the best looking lava in a video game today.
It was really good.
You can't convince me otherwise.
It was great. Yeah.
Like, you remember the lava at the end of Resident Evil 5?
Yep. Not as good.
Very disappointing.
Yeah. It's impressive for the map size and complexity, even though it's still broken up. You know, being able to go in so many different buildings and like the whole like movement system of like leaping over things, and then they had so many enemies that would react. But so an interesting thing about that though is, you know, there was a standalone demo disc released a few months before it came out. Did you guys have that?
I can't remember if I ever played it.
I have this.
I have that as well. So the playable demo disc has a problem.
Okay.
There's no quick knife.
Ah.
If you pull the knife trigger, I believe what it would do is go to the goggles. And to use the knife instead of your gun, you actually go into inventory, equip the knife.
Oh no!
Think about how ruinous that would have been if the game shipped with an equipable knife.
Yeah, because I mean, it's all about slash, slash, slash.
Or just breaking open boxes to get items out.
Oh, that was one of the things I love about the Wii version is the quick knife with the slash.
To me, that always sticks out as like this moment where the game
could have
almost ruined itself. Like, not completely, but that would have absolutely...
For just one thing.
Just that little thing would have absolutely killed the pacing. And it did. It played a lot worse in the demo just because you didn't have quick knife.
Now, what would you say about the, the versions of Resident Evil 4 that were ultimately totally scrapped? It has similar perspective. Do you think
Hookman.
Yeah, I mean, it was this weird, almost supernatural angle that I'm glad they backed away from. Do you think that would have? Do you think on a technology level though, it was pretty similar to what they had shipped with?
It did look pretty different. I'm not sure how it would compare, but it did look great in its own right. It was a beautiful game.
Yeah,
and of course, Devil May Cry was also kind of the first, right? Like Devil May Cry, and then that became its own thing, and then there was Hookman.
That's true.
Then there was actual Resident Evil. They really had a hard time figuring out what they wanted to do.
Yeah, but they nailed it there. What's interesting about Resident Evil 4 is I feel at the time people thought this was a game that was really redefining action games, and I would have been okay with that style of game continuing on forever. But by the time Resident Evil 5 came out, we've got the exact same style of gameplay, which I ate up. I love Resident Evil 5 personally, but people already didn't want that style of game anymore. It was a very short period of time where Resident Evil 4 was actually influential in terms of action game design.
Oh, it influenced Gears of War. In a big way. Like Cliffy B himself admits that. But
then Gears of War
added the cover system.
The moving while aiming and that kind of stuff, which, I was always reluctant for a long time, like, moving while aiming in Resident Evil, I don't know. And I still think it's fine without it, but it is also fine with it in.
Sure.
But it always annoyed me how people got so hung up on the fact that you should absolutely not be able to not move. Like, you have to be able to move while aiming, or else it's annoying. Annoying. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with stopping and aiming?
The way it works,
What's wrong with it? But, I feel like there was a very short period of time where this, redefining game was actually something that was that influential.
Yeah, you're right. It didn't last long, but it sure was amazing.
All right, so what's Corey got?
Oh.
Ooh.
That's impressive.
Conker's Bad Fur Day. I used to have the box for that, and it's like the only N64 box of a game that I'm the original owner of, that I've just completely lost track of. I have no idea where my box for it is.
Oh no!
Isn't it crazy that I have a complete version of it for some reason?
And you don't even like it.
Thanks to my friend Chris, who found it in his basement. And he's like, "Oh,
you just have this."
Somebody just sent me this while I was here because they want me to cover it so bad. So thank you.
Well, we're going.
You didn't realize it.
We're going to cover it right now. Let's do it.
So we're gonna. This is when it happens. This is all you get. Sorry, it's just this.
You have to be a My Life in Gaming Patreon subscriber to see it.
So, obviously, this game was kind of rebooted a couple times.
Yes.
It was Conker's Pocket Tales, right?
Well, no.
That was the first game.
It did come out first, but that was before they rebooted it and mature.
Right.
Yeah, so this was the thing that I can't remember what the very first character for it was, but they went through some different iterations, I believe, of what they wanted to do with this before eventually settling on what this would become.
Originally, it was just called. I think it was just called
Conker.
I think it was called
64.
Well, no, I think it was called like just Conker's Tales.
Conker's something.
I think it was just called Conker's Tale, and then it was like then like when it looked like it was taking form, they called it Conker 64. 12 Tales, or 12, I think it was 12 Tales Conker 64.
Something like that, yeah. And I think it was all kind of related to the character as he appeared in Diddy Kong Racing.
Well, Diddy Kong, this game, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, or Conker, those characters, those games had already been shown off before Diddy Kong Racing was announced.
Well, Diddy Kong Racing was like directly in development after Killer Instinct. Like, they were already working on Diddy Kong Racing.
But they only announced Diddy Kong Racing like 3 months before it shipped.
Exactly. So I think that kind of... it's hard to say when the Conker character first appeared, but it was sometime in that ethos at that time.
Right. At the time, I always looked at as, these are other rare characters. It was before Banjo-Kazooie release. It was before Conker release, but they were characters we were aware of having their own games, just from magazines. We could see that these games were coming before Diddy Kong Racing was announced.
Right.
But from a development timeline, I don't know.
I think this is probably one of the best. This is like an example of Rare's technology at its best on the system. Because it really just... right from the title screen, you have that intro, the tavern with they do a fake reflection of the water.
But when he's stumbling into the tavern, it's 10 frames per second or something.
It's not actually that low.
It looks low.
It's low, but it's still at least twice as high as Perfect Dark.
I couldn't believe it. Recently I saw a complete boxed version of Perfect Dark. I had no idea I knew that you didn't have nearly as much features, not having the expansion.
Yeah.
But you can't even play single player.
No.
There's nothing. It's just the bot match thing or something, or just multiplayer.
Or maybe you can play multiplayer without bots.
It's very limited.
Yeah.
It's basically required.
Yeah.
Whereas DK64, they had to ship it with the expansion pack because of a bug.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They found
it doesn't actually use it.
A late game bug, and if you tried to play without this expansion pack, there was problems with it. So they essentially had to eat the cost and ship it with the expansion pack, which is unfortunate for them.
I had no idea that was...
Yeah, it basically, as far as I know, it doesn't use it in a meaningful way. But Perfect
so.
Dark does.
Perfect Dark absolutely does. This was impressive, and then it got that port to Xbox.
Which
is amazingly impressive for the system.
Right, and
really
a lot of
people... The first shading, right?
More than that, but yeah, that's one
yeah.
thing.
I mean, it's a good looking game. And not only was this a late N64 game, that was a late Xbox game.
Right,
and I think it's a pretty good version. A lot of people don't like it because more words are censored, and I guess the multiplayer. I've never played the multiplayer on the Xbox version, but I guess the multiplaer was significant.
It was nothing like it.
People did not like it, and people love the multiplayer.
They just turned it into an Xbox Live shooter.
Yeah. I remember playing a fair bit of the multiplayer on this back in the day, but I don't remember a ton about it, about how it played.
But this has a lot of it's British humor.
Yeah,
a lot of British humor.
I was big into British humor at the time that it came out. It's interesting because unlike Rare's other platformers and a lot of other platformers of the era, it was very scenario based. One thing led to another. It was less about running around and collecting things. Yeah, you did collect the money and stuff, but it was a different. It felt like a very different structure.
That's true.
Okay. What am I going to go for next?
Let's find out.
Oh, I got an idea. What about? Well, this isn't what I was going to go for, but I will go for Valkyrie Profile 2.
Greatest hits, huh?
I got one that was non-greatest hits, but I got that one. It was brand new.
Oh, okay.
So I hung on to the. I had one that was not greatest hits
previously,
but I ended up trading it. I wish I'd kept it. It doesn't matter.
So
I've never played this one myself.
So this is the greatest hits version.
Sometimes they add stuff.
I know.
Hits or
like Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, they added a ton with that.
So this game was pretty cool because it. Well, I guess not this version, but the Japanese version supports that weird 1080i output mode.
And it sort of screwed with your Framemeister a bit.
It did. It gave it a lot of troubles because it's like a weird off-spec signal.
But it's 1080i, but
the game is still rendering lower res.
Yeah, what do you know what the base res is?
I actually didn't pixel count it, but so the res is obviously it's probably just ever so slightly above 480p, maybe. I need to check.
It looks pretty jagged.
Pretty chunky, but either way. This game was like some of Trias's best work on the system. So it's all 60 frames per second action.
That's crazy.
They simulate HDR lighting on here. You know, a lot of advanced bloom and light shaders that you just never saw on the PS2.
The character models look incredibly detailed.
The backgrounds are stupidly complex. They have like this fields with like the blowing grass blades and everything all over the place. And it's just it's a tech showpiece.
I feel like Tri-Ace didn't get a lot of recognition in the PS2 era, but it seems like they had some of the best handle on the system of anyone.
They were one of the first companies to do stuff like 480p, 16:9, implement Dolby Pro Logic 2, all back in Star Ocean 3.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the Japanese version of that launched in the most broken state.
Yeah.
It was like so broken.
That's another one where the greatest hits has stuff added, right?
I think. Well. The U.S. version included like
the director's cut.
It was like the director's cut version. It had like there was a second there's Star Ocean 3, and then there was like a second disc released, and then they packaged it all in that nice box with the foil cover, which was nice. So I think the U.S. version was pretty much complete and good, but this was kind of the pinnacle. Although I love the way this looks, but I always thought that Radietta stories.
Oh, Radietta,
even better.
Yeah, that's kind of a personal favorite of mine. That game, the battle system is a little boring, but I love everything else about it. The story, the characters, the look. Cool. I feel like it is the best aged game on the system visually because it's just got this very flat and appealing art style.
That's right.
And it's 60 frames per second, widescreen, progressive scale.
Weirdly, the battle I think is 30.
Maybe you're right, but walking around is 60.
Which is the inverse of what you would expect, but that's what it is. But this then, I always felt like this specific game was a precursor to Resonance of Fate, because it has it's a similar kind of battle system. They're different, but that's still like here's this 3D arena kind of thing that you're in. And executing sort of like strategic moves in a way, but that was more focused on guns.
That is such a weird but interesting game.
Do you like the evolution of the battle system in that versus the original? I thought the original.
I kind of prefer the original because I think I mean that's cool, but I thought it got too complex for its own good. And the battles just go on too long. Like they needed to be snappier and faster.
And that's how they were in the original.
The original was just like it was very fast, and I preferred that aspect of it.
What can you tell?
How many more are we doing?
We'll do like 2 more.
Okay.
One more each.
Okay.
Because I really want to touch on the Tiger Electronics version of Karnov.
When I got this was actually my game of the year, 1998. Game of the year, 1988. So back then, before there was YouTube, I would just film my game of the year videos as I always do, and this was.
So that game is in the Linneman collection.
It is for 1988. So, although was this? I can't remember if it was 1988 or 89, but either way, it was one of those years.
It's in there.
This is best. Like I think this is better than the actual NES game. And everything else, this is the best version. So,
it crushes the arcade.
Here's why. I mean, look at this. You can actually see the backgrounds even when it's turned off.
That is true.
Don't even need batteries to see like partial Karnov.
So you had several of these then when you were young too.
Tiger Electronics.
You know, like like I said in my mind before I had it, it was like I was just imagining like, oh, it's gonna be so much fun. It's gonna be just like playing the arcade game or whatever.
Yeah, and then I got Sonic the Hedgehog for that.
And
it's not. I mean,
it's a big old piece of poop.
Not a good fit. It's not that much worse than the Gamecom, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, no, that was Tiger too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's terrible. I hate the Gamecom.
All right, what am I going to finish?
That'd be kind of a good documentary though, something on Tiger Electronics,
sure.
like what it was like
Just
back in the day making.
Yeah.
Like, because they obviously like had to license all these.
Finding the right people to talk to for that would be cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what they went through. Like, how did they get stuff like Resident Evil 2, Sonic Jam, Duke Nukem 3D, all that like on the Gamecom?
Yeah.
Being as bad as they are, like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Symphony of the Night was supposed to be on there.
That's crazy.
Like, what? Why? It doesn't even make sense.
I'm debating between a few things here.
Make it count.
But, how is the Super Nintendo version of Ys 3?
We were just talking about this downstairs.
Yeah, Ys 3 is weird because like there's so many different versions of it, and they're all kind of different.
1, 2, and 3 have a ridiculous amount of versions.
There's so many iterations. I mean, I think this version's all right. It's not bad. It's smoother than like the PC Engine CD version, for instance, which is just kind of a janky mess. But
and bad voice acting too.
Yeah,
which is a huge turnaround from how good the voice acting
1 and 2
and everything is in 1 and 2.
Yeah, and then so this version's all right, but honestly, I've never really been a huge fan of straight Ys 3.
Yeah,
like the shift.
Oath and Felghana
is the true Ys 3. For
yeah,
me. Like, that's
I agree. I agree.
The actual Ys 3 and all its various iterations, it always felt a little bit. Because by going side-scrolling, they shifted away from what they knew, but I don't think that Falcom quite had the know-how to do a really good side-scrolling action game, and so it just didn't feel right.
Didn't they? Didn't Falcom do Xanadu?
Yeah, that's part of their.
Which I mean,
Famicom Xanadu.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a pretty good game.
It's not bad.
It's interesting. It's got a very. I always describe it as having sort of an earthy texture to it.
Yeah.
It's more textured feeling than a lot of other NES games.
Yeah, it does have a different kind of feel.
The world feels very lived in.
Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah. What about...
let's just keep going, I guess.
What do I want to do? How about
we're on Dying Dreamcast.
Blue Stinger.
Ooh. I want to know all about Blue Stinger.
3 launch games that I bought on day 1 on $99.99 on my Dreamcast. So, Blue Stinger is interesting. First of all, I believe it was the director of the game, unfortunately, has passed away.
Yeah,
which is sad.
I've heard that.
But I like the weird stuff that he was doing here.
Yeah. So,
this released in Japan, obviously prior to the US launch, and they actually brought in, I think, like a film director or something to do all the camera work. So he did all this crazy, like, insane camera work. Like, in the first area when you land on the dock, the camera's pulled so far out, you just see the whole area, and your character's like this little dot. And then as you run forward, the camera kind of, like, zooms in, and, like, real close to the ground and pulls up. Like, it's very cool. But it did make the game slightly harder to play. But I think it's better that way, because when Activision brought this to the US, they completely scrapped every bit of that. And they switched it to a third-person camera, like, directly behind the back. And so all the camera stuff got ripped out and replaced with this. And I actually think it loses a lot because the environments can get a little samey. And it was the camera work that made them feel interesting. Because you remember each location because of the different camera angles and the camera placement. And there's so much like effort put into making those weird camera angles.
Yeah.
And then when you take that away, it just kind of felt more generic. But
so play the Japanese version if you
it still has English voice acting. It's got that cool. It's got a really good soundtrack. I think the guy that would work on like the soundtracks for like some of the Gundam animes actually did the music for this, and it's quite good. And it's a mix of like the Dreamcast sound chip and like digital audio, so it's pretty impressive there. It's got that great Christmas music.
Yeah, I remember. I got as far as like the boss of like the shopping mall.
Did you get to Dogs and Elliot in the the bath or whatever together?
No.
Hot tub together. That was some hot Elliot action. And the problem I think with this also with the character models was like the animation was pretty bad. So like. First of all the joints, they didn't have smooth skinning yet, so all the joints were visible.
Yeah.
And, like, it was, like, very, like, robotic. Like, hello, my name is Elliot Ballad. Wait, Dogs, you know.
Dogs is one of the best character names. What's his last name? It's like Dogs Bauer, right?
Something like that. And the way when you first meet him, it's, like, the most awkward exchange I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, when he first shows up in the game, he's just, like... She's like barking stuff at you, which makes sense. I guess,
yeah,
dogs,
but
oh,
I feel like I should give that game another shot because I went into it. I played like 3 or 4 hours. I went into it,
you gave
blind.
Me your copy.
That was originally my copy, and I'm taking it back now. But the thing that really annoyed me, and maybe it would be more fun if I actually played it following a guide. I don't like doing that.
Okay.
But the thing that annoyed me was that there are these limited time events that
right.
if you succeed in like saving a guy that like it was in a train crash,
right.
if you save him in time, then you can get like a much better gun.
Okay.
And
yeah, that's right.
I got stuck on a boss that there was no way to get a gun that was good enough really to kill him, having failed that mission.
I can see that.
And that really annoyed me, so I think I would have to be a lot more careful about that kind of stuff if I were to revisit it. But I will say Illbleed, I say this with all seriousness, is maybe my favorite Dreamcast game.
It's so weird.
Illbleed is great.
Yeah.
I love Illbleed.
It has some technical problems, but it's still pretty awesome.
It's weird enough to be like...
So, one more weird thing about this, though. Because if you remember at the Dreamcast launch, a lot of discs shipped with some sort of like pressing error.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the early copies can't even be read on later Dreamcasts, especially the ones that removed like the ability to read like Red Book audio, like regular CDs, like mil CD compatibility. You put it in a launch copy of Blue Stinger, it's not going to work.
Interesting.
Not all of them, but a lot of them won't. Like, my copy of Blue Stinger only works in one of my Dreamcasts. It doesn't work in any other Dreamcast.
Because Sonic Adventure and...
Sonic Adventure is the same.
With, what is it? This.
Yeah, so, yes, exactly.
They had to put the Hot New on it, right?
There was 4 of these from
Midway,
where the first month, all these were bad, and then they got the Hot New sticker on there.
Hot New actually works on your system.
And also, another thing is that, so I believe the Hot New disc is red, and the regular disc is like a blue tinge.
Yeah.
So it's just, I mean, it's hot and new, so it's, obviously
it's Hot
red.
New.
Hot New and works.
Same game works. I've had less troubles with Hydro Thunder. I think
it's a good game.
The Midway stuff was more related to
go
CD audio. Like, I think that they tended to work on more systems, but like, especially in like, there was another one. There was Ready to Rumble. If you listen to Ready to Rumble Boxing on the early copies, there'd be like a lot of skipping and hitching in the music playback. Mm-hmm. There was like a glitch with the way it read that. Hot New fixed it.
Hot New.
Hot New edition.
So I love that Hot New goodness. I see Marvel vs. Capcom, and I'm reminded of how I bought that game, had nobody to play it with at the time because everybody was into fighting games, and I traded it away.
It has a 240p mode.
Yeah, I know. I was annoyed that I did that.
It's a really good version. It's like most other fighting games on the system are just not good to play with the Dreamcast pad, especially if it's like a 6-button fighter and you have to use like the triggers.
I am a fan of the H-Tech stick though. Like for a stock system arcade stick, like that one is quite nice. For the
I had this metal one. I don't have it anymore, but it was like metal.
Okay. Was it like a shiny metal?
Yes.
I think I remember that one. Yeah. That was an interesting
It was really expensive when it came out.
I see you have Sonic Adventure Japanese version there, which would have been the launch version, because there's Sonic Adventure International as the fixed one.
Yeah, this was given to me by a fan of the show. Just sent it to me.
So this is fun, because this is like... So, international version is the best version on Dreamcast, and this version's the worst. This is really bad.
International version is better than even this one?
Broken. I think it's even improved over this.
What did they improve in it?
Okay, so there's actually like multiple versions of the U.S. version as well. Obviously, everybody knows about the Hollywood video version.
Yeah.
Which was like the not for resale.
Yeah.
Which is really incomplete.
Then there's the launch day version. I bet it's really expensive. I bet if you could find one.
It's expensive, but not worth it. Then there's the launch day version, which is good, but it still has a few glitches here and there. It's better than this, though. It runs better, but it has glitches like if you play through like a stage like Skydeck in the story mode, it runs totally fine. And then you go to time attack mode and replay it, and the frame rate's like way worse. Like,
really?
And the time attack frame rate, which is really bad, is the same as this one in all modes. So it feels like they optimize some of the stages for like the story mode specifically, and whatever they're doing with maybe the data's different, the time attack is bad. So the time attack version on this version runs like this version, but when you play through in a linear fashion to the story, it's fine.
Right.
So it's kind of a weird situation. But then there was even other versions later, and the way you can tell is when you first boot this up, on the original versions of this have a static title screen.
Right.
The newer versions, they added this like wavy water effect to it.
Oh, okay.
It's really cool looking, but you put that in, you see that wavy effect, and then you know that's the newer version. It's really like the only. There's probably a way to tell in the case, but just at a glance, like put the disc in, see the title screen, you'll know right away if it's the more advanced version.
So, what while we're talking about Sonic Adventure, what would you suggest to someone? I've played Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah.
And I have played Sonic Adventure 1, but not much of it. I don't own any version of it. Should I go for a Dreamcast, GameCube?
I think you should play on Dreamcast. It has issues, but it's kind of the best version of the game in terms of like the original vision.
But I need to look for a later release.
Yeah, and the lighting is so bad in the later re-releases, and like GameCube especially is horrible.
There goes the heat hanging. You guys keep talking.
So yeah, GameCube version sucks. The frame rate is unlocked, so it goes to 60, but it drops like crazy. So it's like all over the place.
So is it locked 30 and?
It's locked 30 mostly on Dreamcast, which isn't optimal, but it works. GameCube, they like broke a lot of the lighting because they changed the way they light the scenes in the whole game. So and they redid.
Is it 480i?
The textures are worse. It's 480p.
Okay.
So lighting and textures are worse. Like it just looks bad. And then the other ports from the GameCube version then, which every other version is based on.
Really?
They all have similar problems, and there's a lot of examples out there to show like how broken things are, and even just like the scenery, like they rip out scenery. Like you get to where the emerald is near the end. On Dreamcast, there's like pine trees everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look great. They're like it's very simple pine trees, but it gives it like a look of like the woods. On GameCube, there's 0 trees. It's just empty space, so it looks like completely unfinished. Like what happened here? And like when you're going through like the ruins, there's all these skulls on the wall with like flaming eyes. Like the eyes are lit up like a light source almost. But on the GameCube version, none of it's lit. It just looks like an unlit model that's just like completely out of place, just stuck on the wall.
Well, on the same token, what about Sonic Adventure 2 compared to say GameCube?
GameCube version's good, but it's missing the stencil shadows.
Okay.
Which on Dreamcast you see when like Sonic moves in front of a light, you actually see shadow cast over his body. You see all the shadows on all the characters, which is cool. GameCube version doesn't have that. But other than that, GameCube version's fine.
So the Dreamcast version of Adventure 2 is still better?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still the best.
Does the GameCube version not...
I still had it. I got rid of that one. The camera annoyed me so much that I think I got...
I always thought the camera was okay in the Sonic stages, but... And you can get by in the Tails mech stages, but...
Yeah.
There's diamond hunting missions.
Well, the problem is that it doesn't stay. You move the camera and it doesn't stay there.
Well, it doesn't stay, but 2, you can only rotate around a character. You can't look up and down. And those are very vertical stages that require Knuckles to search all over the place.
Yeah.
And you can't look around very easily, so it just feels super frustrating.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
I'm not a huge Sonic guy, but for some reason I'm like always, like especially the early 3D Sonic games, I have a strange curiosity about them.
They're neat. They're fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to pick one more?
One more.
One more. Whew, that's a lot of pressure. What about?
Make it count.
Whew,
if you're not going to ask about bad dudes,
don't ask about bad dudes.
What about? Oof.
You should pick something on the PS1.
Oh, now this is a game. So,
I found that at Goodwill. I couldn't say no to it.
The cleaning kit. So what I love about this box art is that they're actually willing to show corrupted tiles on there. And Mario wiping it away. And you can tell that they captured this footage here with its composite videos. It's like pretty low quality, I think.
It's like off screen.
But my favorite thing about it is the 2 screenshots on the box. You got scrambled screen and then empty screen.
Which is like all blue. It looks like a Framemeister.
Avoid empty or scrambled screens. So if you have empty screens on your Super NES, this will do it for you.
What about Mega Man Legends?
Ooh, that's a good game.
Yes, it is.
I love Mega Man
Unfortunately,
Legends.
Corey doesn't have Legends 2, which makes me sad.
So,
I'll get it eventually.
Aside from not having Legends 2, he also has the greatest hits version of Legends.
So let's not even talk about it. Let's forget about it.
You want to know? Yeah. I bought that from...
this is a good story. This is a good story.
In New York City who was the first person in line.
You got it before.
Before, yeah. I got it before, as he ended up being the first person to buy a PlayStation 4.
What, really?
He's like, you know that like image that they did with all the people. Like he was a NeoGAF user.
Okay.
Like I can't remember his name, but he's like standing in the middle and he's like on the boat.
Yeah.
It's like that's who I bought it from.
Okay, so this is actually a really cool copy. That's a weird factoid, but still. So obviously, this game was pretty well known for what it did. It has some weird control issues, but I think it's actually really interesting.
I think it's very playable.
It always reminded me of Skies of Arcadia for some reason, but Mega Man, like even this came out first, but like the very expressive characters.
Yes.
But there's the N64 version of this as well.
Right, which I've never played.
It's very bad.
But do they compress the voices a lot on N64?
That's not the real problem. So they did compress the voices. It's all there. The problem is that it runs like garbage. The frame rate is so bad on N64. Like right away, like the first hallway, it's already under 30. There's nothing happening.
Wow.
It's so choppy. You get out into the city and it's almost unplayable. Where this is actually almost a locked 30 frames per second, which for a game with big environments like this, pretty impressive.
Yeah, a very unique art style. I'm surprised more PS1 games didn't try to have that sort of flat cartoon look. I think of this as like, this is the PlayStation's Wind Waker because it holds up
peak PlayStation 3D.
So well.
It holds up way better than most PlayStation, because you're right, it's all like very flat shaded polygons with like just shading.
It's almost cell shading before cell shading. I mean, it holds up in the same way.
It's really cool. And it's a good game. It has a fully, the soundtrack is all handled by the PlayStation sound chip, so no digital music here, which is always interesting, which was an issue, I think, bringing it to N64 as well.
I always thought...
The roll always says, Mega Man.
Mega
Man.
I think we can all agree that Rockman Dash is a way better name.
I like that. Rockman Dash is awesome.
And the cover art for the American versions is garbage.
It's garbage.
Especially Legends 2. Legends 2 had like the sunset on the Japanese art, I think.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so I couldn't resist, but I got like shrink wrap versions, the PSP versions of these, because it keeps like that artwork, but it's a nice fuller version of the art with a nice vertical box, and it's just beautiful looking.
You know, I think I always thought it was interesting that Legends 2, I played it sometime during the PS3 era, and I was like, wow, this game feels like surprisingly modern when you do the when you use the DualShock controller like that.
It's
like
actually not bad.
It's sort of weird how so few games of that era, like, you know, even something like say Spyro 1. It's like, how hard was it to figure out that you've got this right analog stick? You can move the camera with this, but they don't let you do it. But this, like, lets you aim. I mean, it's not that many steps back from something like Uncharted. I mean, it controls really nicely.
It's not bad. I agree. It works pretty well. It's a great playing game. It looks pretty amazing for the system. It's definitely one of my favorites on there. Is that it?
Is that going to do it?
Whew, I guess that'll do it.
We could probably stay here for another 2 hours.
We could probably go through just about everything and find something to say, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But maybe we can do another one next year.
Maybe next time we can do Batloads.
Batloads!
All right, everybody.
All right, well, thanks for watching this random video.
Yeah.
And subscribe to these guys' Patreon.
and this guy, too.
Well, they'd already be...
Yeah, that's right.
They already did it. That's fine.
Please keep subscribing.
Keep subscribing to this.